I was talking to a friend of mine who is dealing with a lot of stuff right now, and I said that I never would have imagined the relief that came from putting this book out. Like people supporting me and like talking about like and thanking me for doing it, talking to me about their problems, telling me that they don't feel alone anymore. And I don't even like any worry I ever had about people finding out about this side of me is so far gone, man. There's so much relief, and I'm just like, it just added to the different person that I am.
Hey, Mike, how's it going? Welcome to the Question and the Answers podcast. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's going great. It's just a chill weekend right now. I mean, I always have a ton of work that I'm doing, but nothing too crazy. How you doing?
Doing good, man. Like same here, just trying to get through this weekend without having to do too much,
Yeah.
trying to relax because thankfully I'm still working and I have plenty on my plate with that, but there's always projects, I think, as you know, right?
Yeah. So your tsunami bomb poster just like caught me off guard because I don't hear the name a lot anymore. But how long do you play in Tsunami Bomb?
Yeah, so I'm the new guy in the band.
Okay. Okay, that's what I was
I,
gonna
I
ask.
Yeah, I joined the band a few years back, originally as kind of more of like a hired gun. I was just kind of
Okay.
doing it on a show-by-show basis, but they eventually kind of asked me if I wanted to be in the band. And so I
Cool.
said, yeah, of course. Like, that'd be a
Were
lot
you,
of fun.
were you with them the last time they came to New York, like a year or two ago? It was like a
Yeah.
real small room. Okay, I went to that show. That's where I got my shirt.
Oh, okay, shoot. Yeah, I'm sorry that I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, you couldn't have. I didn't talk to anybody or anything. I went by myself too, and I just watched because I saw Tsunami Bomb back in like 2001, or no, it would have been 2003 with like Brand New, I think it
Oh,
was.
okay.
Um, I caught them in Austin a long time ago, so I know different band members and stuff. But yeah, it's
Right.
been since then since I saw, and then I like randomly saw Tsunami Bomb was in New York, and I had to go. So I'm a big fan, man. I'm stoked
Hey,
to watch you.
yeah, that's awesome. No, the next time we get out there, I mean, with all luck, it'll be before too
Yeah,
long, but
yeah,
we should definitely meet up. That'd be a lot of
for
fun.
sure. Yeah.
But so Mike Henneberger is our guest today, and he is the author of Rock Bottom at the Renaissance, which is a memoir, basically kind of telling, I mean, I'll let you describe it, but it's basically a memoir telling about your time kind of coming from Texas into New York and,
Yeah.
some of the relationships that you've had and how it ties in with like your love of music. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a great explanation of it, because it really is about this period of my life. Whereas like when you read it, it's written during a weekend in a hotel, that I spent, here in New York in the Times Square Renaissance Hotel. And it's written in that period, and there's a lot of flashbacks and stuff to past relationships. But so it feels like it's about like that moment in my life, but it's really about the first couple of years that I lived in New York, growing up in Texas, or I feel like it's very possible for people anywhere outside of New York or LA to like romanticize these big cities, especially if you're a creative person. You kind of know that you have to get to one of them to kind of build a career in that or any kind of sustainable future in it. And so I always knew that. I mean, I played in bands growing up and stuff and grew up in a small town, but knew I had to get out. So yeah, it's just after a lifetime of, I mean, I was like 28 when I wrote this. So, it's not a long lifetime, but I also wasn't just like I probably had the emotional intelligence of like a, 19-year-old right out of the house. But I was 28 when I started writing this. And yeah, it's just about kind of romanticizing this city because of what you've seen in movies and TV shows and what you've read in books and what you've heard in songs. You just have this idea where like all this magic can happen here. I'm like getting the sunlight on my ear and it's weird. My ear is glowing. Um, but yeah, so you get brainwashed about that magic that can happen here, and you believe in it being so real that when it doesn't happen immediately, it starts wearing you down. It can for some people, and myself, I been diagnosed with major depressive disorder and anxiety disorder. So having those things can make any of the littlest things seem like life or death situations. And I'd say this book takes place in like 2011 to 2013. Yeah, like it in the book, it really is a life and death situation. Like I almost die. There's like 3 different stories in there of when I almost killed myself. And it's because of these little things we come across in life that seem like life and death situations, but really only are if you let them be. I mean, I've done a lot in the last few years to work on my mental health, and I still do. And anybody with mental health issues has to for the rest of their life. So, but I've been doing that, and I've been seeing the benefits of it. So, I mean, those things aren't that detrimental to me anymore, and I've been able to cope with them better. So, yeah, I mean, that book is just kind of about a time before I was like that, and just dealt with it in super unhealthy ways. And then, of course, it's all about how music has kind of helped me get through that stuff. Like I think musically, I played in bands starting when I was 14 years old. I worked in music journalism from 20, and I still do 18 years later. And so like music has always been a huge part of my life, and it's what I didn't have the best like childhood. Like my parents weren't really around, and they weren't those kinds of parents that like actually talk to you about what's going on and how you feel and stuff. And so like I just found that all in pop culture, and that's what this book is kind of also about, is kind of leaning on those things to help get you through. Because as sad as any song you've ever heard is, and I always tell people that this book is like an old Bayside album or an old Dangerous Summer album, where like in old Bayside records, Anthony sings about cutting his wrist, and in Dangerous Summer records, AJ sings about, wanting to kill himself too, or wanting to not be alive. And, but we would never hear those. We would have heard those songs if they had actually done it,
Right.
They turned those feelings into something creative, and they just kept going. And that's what this book is for me. This book is that, like, I turned those feelings into this book, and I'm still here, So like the only way those things, like there's always, something on the other end if you can just, push yourself to get there. So that's why I released this book, hoping that people can see that.
Now, how long ago did you actually release the book?
It's been about a couple months now. So in June, it came out officially in June. I did an Indiegogo for it a couple of months before, so some people got it earlier than that. But so it's been out since June. And it's on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, pretty much anywhere you can get an ebook or a book.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, like, why didn't you release it sooner? Was it just because you didn't feel like it was complete, or were you concerned about like the material or something like that? Or
yeah, I mean, it's been complete for a long time. At first, I didn't release it because I wasn't doing much better, and I was afraid that, I was going to work. I had a great job. I've had great jobs since. I met my wife. I'm happily married for 5 years coming in September.
Congrats.
Thank you. So at first, like before I met her, for me, it was just like, I wasn't far enough away from that person in the book to be okay with people knowing I was ever that person in the book. now I read that book and I don't it feels like fiction to me. It feels like that person in the book. I talk to people and I often accidentally say it's a character because it wasn't a character, but now it's so far from who I am, that it's hard to see that it's hard to I can't even, like, completely unconsciously or subconsciously I dismiss that person as not even me. It's like I'm reading about somebody. But there was a long period of my life where I I wasn't far enough away that I didn't want people to know that stuff, that's real shit that I deal with. And it's really hard for me. And sometimes, back then I would abuse pills to deal with it and drink severely to deal with it. And often was suicidal. So I just didn't want people to know that. And that extended to, like, when I met my wife, when we first started dating. She's always known about the book, but just not, like, in detail. Um, and like, I didn't want her to know that side of me. And there's some I don't go easy on myself in the book. There's some very, I say, shameful things. Was I'm not, like, ashamed of them anymore, but at that point I was, and embarrassed by, and definitely didn't want certain family members or people in my life to know about. So yeah, that was part of it. And then one day in, like, 2015, I read it, and that was the first time that I felt like it wasn't me anymore. And I was reading it and I was like, oh man, I'm reading this as somebody completely different from the person in the book who still has major depressive disorder and anxiety disorder. And this is inspiring me, and this is helping me understand it, and so it hit me that it could help people who deal with it, who think they're alone in it, but it can also help people who don't deal with it, who might have a loved one who does. It'll help them understand it better, to see how hard it can be. And so that's about, like, 2016 or so is when I started thinking I needed to put it out. And, so I gave it some more tweaks, and then there's just so much involved in it and it's so important to me that I wanted to do it right. I wanted to, like, make sure that, like, I'm not even thinking about, like, getting rich off of it or anything. It's a self-published book, but I do want it to get to the people who need it, So I didn't want to just, like, drop it on Amazon and then not know how to promote it, not know how to, talk to people about it. And so it just kept getting pushed back and pushed back. Yeah, I mean, that fear never went away completely. And so that was a big part of it too. My wife and her family are great, and I love them so much. So that kind of, the more serious she and I got, the more scary it got for them to know that side of me,
Right.
So yeah, there was a lot of things that it was really scary, but I was talking to a friend of mine who is dealing with a lot of stuff right now. And I said that I never would have imagined the relief that came from putting this book out. Like, people supporting me and, like, talking about, like, and thanking me for doing it, talking to me about their problems, telling me that they don't feel alone anymore. And I don't even, like, any worry I ever had about people finding out about this side of me is so far gone, man. There's so much relief, and I'm just like, it just added to the different person that I am. So I'm glad I did. And yeah, I don't even think I wish I put it out earlier. I think everything that needed to come together came together.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, I can say, having just gone through and read it myself, I mean, there's a lot in there that I can absolutely relate to. And, we're not that far apart in age. Like, I'm 42. And so I think you're, like, 4 years younger than me, right?
Yeah, I'm 38. I'll be 38 in November. Yeah.
So we're basically in the same, like, peer group, and, kind of came up in, I would say that there's a lot of parallels, to be perfectly honest with you. Yeah. Like, grew up in a small town, parents were around, but, I mean, my parents didn't get divorced, but, my dad, like, worked away, so he was gone during the week, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I didn't see him, like, most of the time. But big into music. Like music's always kind of been like my lifeblood. It kind of drives me. Grew up in the 1980s and 90s, so a lot of that pop culture that you talk about, like kind of being
Yeah.
romanticized and kind of always yearning for something bigger and something more. Um, I can certainly relate to what you talk about with like the girl.
Yeah.
Like there's always the girl, like that seems to be like the revolving theme.
Yeah.
um and like how you tie in like these lyrics and like these songs, and how they just make such a huge difference to like this as the soundtrack of your life.
Yeah.
And it's almost like everything's there in its perfect place right when you need it, in a weird way. Like even when it's sad and even when it's like frustrating, it's like there's always that song,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
just kind of makes perfect sense at that time. And I mean, I think there's plenty of ways that you can look at it. Like you can kind of look at it, it's like, well, that's just coincidence, you
No,
know.
yeah, I mean, I honestly don't think it is, at least for like people who are into this kind of music, like the bands that I mentioned in the book. It's like Jimmy Eat World, Bayside, The Dangerous Summer, Bright Eyes, Death Cab for Cutie, Mayday Parade, The Wonder Years, um, Two Door Cinema Club's in there. So yeah, it's a lot of pop punk and emo, but also like some indie rock in there too. And those are just the ones that the chapters are named out of
Right.
after. When you get into chapters, I mentioned like Acceptance and the Juliana Theory, and Taylor Swift is even in there. So the thing that I've always talked about with people is that like, and it's something I've been really excited about, because a lot of people have ordered this book from me posting about it in Facebook groups that are like a Bayside Facebook group or a Wonder Years Facebook group or a pop punk Facebook group. And um, it means so much to me that like people have found their way to this book through that music community, because I I think this book is for people who have that same connection to music, and it's because like music teaches us how to be in touch with our emotions. And I mean, not just emo, but emo gave punks the permission to do that,
Right.
um and so like I think that I love that that is something that is connecting here, that strangers are buying this book, but they're not really strangers, because we can all make those connections in this music community. If we all, where we're going to shows from these bands, then we can probably relate to something in this book.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I like you reflect on your relationship with like God,
Yeah.
which is something that I've kind of gone back and forth with
Yeah.
several times in my life. Your relationships with your siblings and with family, and how that can kind of shift over time. And I mean, I've had my ups and downs with substance abuse. I mean,
Yeah.
understanding that that's always something that you kind of have to keep, you know, attentive of.
Yeah.
And understand that it's like it's an ongoing thing. Like these things just don't poof magically disappear. This is something that you do have to work on for the
Yeah.
like you said earlier, like for the rest of your life. For
Yeah.
most people, that's the way it actually is, you know.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time romanticizing that, oh, like if I just do this, or if I just do this, or if I just do this, and if it all lines up correctly, that it's poof going to be like magically
Yeah.
happy all the time. That's not reality. Like that's not the way it goes,
No, it's not. And especially like when you actually have, a mental illness, which for the most part, or for a lot of them it is a chemical deficiency, in your brain. So it's not like just it's not something superficial or tangible that fixes that. Nothing fixes that. So even when you do, like, I feel pretty good about, my position right now, where at least, I mean, I'm not crazy about my day job, but it's in the realm of the things of video production, which is what I want to do. I mean, it is, I'm my day job, I'm a producer and director of commercials, but so I'm doing what I want to do, just not in the way I particularly want to do it. I'm happily married. Like I like I have like my life, it feels good, but I still have had depression just knock me down and leave me in bed crying, and I've had like, when that gets so bad, of course, the first thing that pops into my head is like, why keep living if you can feel this way? But the whole key is you answer yourself and you say, because the last time I felt this way, I didn't kill myself and all these cool things happened after that,
Right.
So if I don't do it this time, I'll get past it and then more good things will happen. And then I'll get depressed again, sure. But then you just keep getting to the other side and more good things happen. Um, and so, yeah, there's no fixing it. There's only learning how to handle it better.
Right.
And that's all I've been able to do.
Well, and that's why they call them coping mechanisms.
Yeah, exactly.
Like learning to cope and to understand that it's going to be a continual battle. You're never going to really win the battle, right?
Yeah, but the war is still going to go on. You need to keep like supplying yourself to stay in the war, so you don't eventually lose a battle that kills you. That's a perfect metaphor,
Well, right. It's it's a really, really dark way to look at something that actually means something positive,
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the thing is, though, is it really? I mean, it is a really dark thing, and this is why, another reason, like, I want the book to be out there, and I want to have more conversations like this, because I keep trying to do, like, and I think we came to do this because I like posted on Facebook, right, that I want to do every podcast and every interview I can do, and it's not because I make like $3 a book, I'm not like getting rich off this book. It's not for that. It's because I want to have this conversation so people feel more comfortable having this conversation. This shit is dark. There's no pretty way to have it. And like every time I talk to somebody about this, I express it like, what's the alternative? You die by killing yourself.
Right.
So like you can either push through and like, when I say I actively work at this, I meditate, which is like I see a therapist once a month, and because I go to therapists through the VA, so I only get to see a therapist once a month. But I've been seeing this particular one for 2 years, and he's been great. And he kind of led me to trying meditation, which people always told me I should have. People always told me I should try it. And I thought, there's no way I can sit alone with my thoughts. But it's not even about that. It's just about like slowing down. And it teaches you that if you lose focus, it's okay. Like forgive yourself and then bring it back, which pays in dividends throughout my life. Like I felt it immediately. But I meditate. I, take my medication that's prescribed to me because I finally found medication that works. And or that works for me. And I like watch YouTube videos with like affirmations. It's like it all sounds. There's a lot of it sounds cheesy, and like I work out, but that stuff's all important. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
And like the thing is if you don't actively work at it, you die. Like, and if you don't die, then you're living with depression hitting you more often than it would if you were working on it, So like
Right.
the alternatives aren't good. So like we shouldn't, pretty it up because it is dark. It's like it's the metaphor. If you you die in war, and this is something that can kill you just like anything else, any other disease or illness. So yeah, I just, yeah, there's nothing wrong with having a dark conversation about it because
Totally. Yeah.
people have lost people they love from it.
Absolutely. And I think that the more, like you mentioned, the more that we actually actively talk about it in the open and get very real about our experiences, the more it will be, I guess, acceptable, for people to feel okay with it, because it is like, there's a lot of, there's still a lot of stigma around like depression and anxiety, and particularly like the differences between how men and women approach it. And there's still like so much like macho bullshit around like men not being able to like express their feelings correctly.
Yeah, even if
It's
you can
ridiculous,
express your feelings, like some people see it as not a masculine thing to do.
Right.
And but then it's like, I mean, that's what I say, like, who cares? Like, you're gonna keep it in, and then this is the conversation I always have with people. So what? Then you're gonna keep it in and then kill yourself? Because that is how it happens, man.
Yeah.
Like, there's no pretty way to talk about it. It's like, is that what you want? Do you want to make your family sad and anybody who cares about you sad, and not get to see, like, dude, I have had dreams come true. I got to work at Rolling Stone for a little while. Like, as somebody who started a zine with his brother in a town of 25,000 people, so I could interview bands and write about bands, like, I got to work at Rolling Stone. That's a fucking dream of mine.
They've literally made movies about that.
Exactly,
yeah.
Right? And that was after I wrote this book. So, like, if I would have been in that hotel that weekend and decided to just kill myself, I never would have worked at Rolling Stone. After I wrote this book, I worked on a project at Comedy Central with Robert Smigel, who's a huge writer at Saturday Night Live, or
Absolutely.
like for decades at Saturday Night Live. He's created so many things that you love, that all people love. One of my comedy idols, and I got to sit next to him at a conference table and work with him on a project, and I share an Emmy with him. Like, that Emmy right there, he and I went up on stage at the Emmys to get it. Like, that was after I wrote this book. Like, if I would have died from the things that happened in this book, that never would have happened.
Right.
So, like, that's the thing. That's how we all need to think about it. It's like, who cares if someone thinks you're a pussy because you cry or listen to emo or like have bad feelings about a breakup or whatever? Who cares? Get past it, move on, and then you're like, dreams can come true after that. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, and the fact that for every single individual, that's going to look uniquely different.
Totally. Yeah.
Like, that's an important piece that I wish that we had a better mechanism in place to offer to people and try to drill that in as like, hey man, like, you may not ever win an Emmy.
Yeah.
You may never get your dream job. You may never meet the right partner. Right. And that's also okay.
Totally.
Right? But you won't ever know if you're not around.
Yeah.
Right.
And you probably haven't even thought of what's going to make you excited yet. Like,
right.
I never thought I was going to write a book ever. I started writing by playing in bands. When I was 14 to 22 years old, I thought I was going to play in bands the rest of my life. I haven't played in a band since I was 22. It's been 16 years. That was my life for those 7 years or 8 years. And I was super depressed after my bands broke up. Never thought that was ever going to happen. And like, I never thought I was going to do anything but playing bands. And as much as I like credit like albums that I love that have gotten me through things, I wanted to make those albums. I still do partially, I probably never will, but that's exactly to like what you were saying. Like, you don't have to win an Emmy. You don't have to, do something, specific. You might, like, for people out there, you might not even know yet what it's going to be that's going to make you say, my fucking dream is now true. Like, it's so crazy. Like I said, I never, like, people ask me like what if I'm going to write another book. Like, I never thought I was going to write one book. That was never a goal for me. And it happened. And now it's like, I'm very happy about it,
Well, and I mean, it's a lot to be proud of. I mean, it's always great when you can accomplish something, like something like writing a book. Like, personally, I would love to write a book too. I know that it just takes a lot of work and dedication, and it means that I have to tap into skills that I haven't spent a lot of time working on, you know?
Yeah.
And, for me, like writing guitar riffs, like that's something that comes a little bit more naturally because I've spent a lot of time on it, And I think sometimes people just get so weighed down by their own negative talk,
Yeah. Yeah.
that it keeps them from even trying, and
Yeah.
and I think something that is helpful, at least what I've taken as being very helpful for me, is by trying to break things down into smaller successes,
Yeah,
and
totally.
like I know that for me, what sounds like the pathway to writing a book would be to just writing more, period.
Yes. Yeah.
So even just writing a new paragraph every day, or a poem, or keeping a journal, or doing more, I don't know. I don't know, anything that involves writing thoughts on paper,
Yeah.
and for anything that you're interested in or want to succeed at, that's just going to be part of the process. But because we have so much negative self-talk,
Yeah.
it's getting the coping mechanisms and the skills to break away from letting that be your big deterrent,
Yeah, for sure. And it's so much, and of course, like, I'm sure, I could probably speak for both of us here in acknowledging that it's easier said than done.
Of course. Yeah.
And like, so I don't want anyone listening to think we think it's easy, because we know it's not. But I want to add to that it's not just the negative self-talk, which is a huge thing. I struggle with that. Man, I can't tell you, like, that's a huge struggle with me, to the point where, like, I just don't do things. Like, I've been thinking about adapting this book into a TV series forever, and I just haven't done it because I'm afraid to start and not know where to go with it and whatever. But if I had started when I thought about it, I'd probably be there by now, because it's been before it came out that I thought about that. And that's what I was going to say earlier. Like, I started writing by writing songs, and then I kept writing by, doing journalism and music journalism, but also by writing screenplays. So I never thought I was going to write a book. And so, like, I have those skills, and that's the same thing with this book. It's like, I didn't have the skills to write a book, but I had been writing for years, so, and I'd been writing about music, and I'd been writing, like, dating columns for different things. So, like, those skills were continued to get, like, refined, so I was able to do this when it happened. Because even when I did it, I didn't set out to do it. I just locked myself in a hotel room, and this is what came out. But along with the negative self-talk is this weird, or like horrible thought I think a lot of people have, I definitely struggle with, is that, like, we care what other people are thinking of us. Like, I won that Emmy in 2013, and it's probably the most, like, superficially impressive thing about my career, So, like, of course, people back home were like, oh my God, it was a big deal. I talked to, like, multiple hometown newspapers and stuff. My dad was probably more proud of me than anything else, even being in a fucking Christian ska band that toured the country 3 times, but this means something. Okay. But then nothing happened. Then nothing that big happened again. And so, of course, in my head, I'm like, oh, people think I'm a one-hit wonder, and, like, I'm not working at Comedy Central anymore, and I'm running my own production company and making a living off of doing projects that I want to do, which is fucking impressive to anybody who works in my industry. But to people who don't know that, they're like, oh yeah, Mike's not working for any network anymore, cable network, and Mike's not working on shows on TV, So it's very easy for me to think all these people think I'm a failure.
Right.
Because I'm not working on anything that they know about, And there was a good amount of time where nothing happened, and because, man, this book takes everything. Like, working on a self-published book, you're basically an independent band. You know, you have to promote everything. You have to make sure people don't forget about you. You have to, come up with new ways to keep people interested. Um, so yeah, like there was a good year where I didn't really do anything production wise. I didn't put out any cool videos or anything. And the whole time I'm thinking like people are thinking that I'm a failure and that I'm not working on anything. But the truth is nobody's thinking about you, period. All those people you're worried about thinking that you're a failure because you're not doing something cool, they're not even thinking about you, period. Because also they're probably worried about the same thing with themselves.
Right.
But like they have no reason to like spend their days or minutes thinking, oh, that asshole hasn't done anything. Ha ha ha. Like they don't fucking care, man.
Yeah. Well, and if they do care, it's like on such a small scale that it's fleeting.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
maybe Mike Henneberger pops into their head for like a brief 30 seconds and then poof, he's gone,
Yeah,
And maybe in that time, I mean, maybe in that time they are passing a judgment about something or whatever. But why should that bother you? Like
yeah,
why? Like,
yeah.
unless it's like directly affecting your safety or health or like your money in
Exactly.
some
Yeah.
way, like none of that matters, you know?
Yeah.
So no, I think that you're totally right. Like the whole self-published thing, it's got to be like a full-time job because you're having to make sure that it gets in front of so many eyes
Yeah.
and be in the ecosphere, that we're the ecosystem that everyone that your audience lives in.
Yeah.
And I mean, what if so far, I mean, just out of curiosity, how many books do you think you sold?
So I did an Indiegogo before I launched it and had at least 200 people buy the book through that. So there's like 200 there. I would say it probably sold like six or 700 now.
That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, um, something around there.
Killer. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
shoot.
no, I mean, I'm excited about that. And like, and the thing is too, is that like, it's because like, it doesn't sell unless I'm actively promoting it. Like I did some Facebook ads for a while and I could see that those actually worked because it popped up a bunch of sales at that point. Or if I like go out on, Facebook groups and talk to people about it, stuff like that. So yeah, but like I said, I still have a day job and I'm still working on some other projects too. So I don't have the time that I would like to have to do all that stuff. And like, you know, there's like like I said, one of those things is you have to come up with, unique or like entertaining ways for people to pay attention to it. And I learned how to do all that that was my job at Comedy Central, was like keeping people interested in TV shows when they only made 10 to 20 new episodes a year. I had to keep people interested the rest of the year because I was the digital media person for TV shows. So like I know how to do it, and I know that it's absolutely necessary for even like I worked on the show Tosh.0 and Workaholics. Like even for a show like Workaholics, like you need somebody like me who's going to spend their day on social media keeping the conversation going about your show, or people are going to forget about it. And
Right.
I'm not Workaholics, like I'm just a small book. um but it's still, it takes that much more from me. And so like I have the ability to do it and I have the like assets to do it, but it's just like the time that it takes, man. It's so much. So yeah, I mean, it's but like I only ever played in independent bands and that's it. Like I learned the whole DIY punk world. Thank God for that. Like I'm so proud that I came out of the DIY punk world, because I wouldn't have been able to do anything in my life without that. Like that taught me how to promote. It taught me how to, how to take care of the people who help you out. Like, yeah, man, like I did all the booking for my bands. I, did the management stuff. And so I learned really young how to promote shit and like make things successful on your own, without needing, and honestly, man, like publishing companies and record labels, like, they don't know any better. They just have the money to hire people to do the stuff.
Right.
That's the thing. But they don't know any better than anybody who's like actively like online. We're pretty much at a point where we can all see what works and doesn't work. Like,
right. And that's something that I think any artist in any kind of art form or genre needs to kind of consider when they're trying to get their work out there. I mean, it's hard to impress upon this to some bands, because some bands are strictly kind of against that, like they don't want to come across as being either inauthentic or unthoughtful about their art. And I think that there's always a balance that you can find,
Oh, totally. And there, like,
go ahead.
There's like, authentic is pretty easily defined,
Sure.
it's who you are. So if you're doing something and it feels like it's not who you are, then it's not authentic. But like, you can still put out authentic content, or like you can still do authentic promotion every day. Like, the repetitiveness or the quantity of it doesn't make it inauthentic. It's the quality of it that makes it authentic or inauthentic. So that's it. Like,
yeah.
And that was also something very like important from when I worked at, and I mean, I only bring this up because I feel like people in bands like listen to this, and I got my job at Comedy Central by like applying all my knowledge from playing in bands, DIY. And then like, I took that knowledge from Comedy Central and I put it together. But like, that was very important at Comedy Central. It was like, I worked on like 3 or 4 different shows at a time, and you can't have the same voice on Tosh.0 that you have on, Workaholics or Key and Peele or Nathan For You. Like, all these shows are different and they have their own voices. So like, it was always from the beginning, it was important to be authentic, because if you're trying the same shit on one show that you tried on another, that's not authentic. And then like, you're misrepresenting the show and it doesn't work. So like, it doesn't, I mean, quantity is not a killer of authenticity.
Right. Yeah, because I had this conversation with bands, not only that I work with through my record label, but just peers, friends of mine, and I'm the type of person that is not opposed to like posting something brand new every day on like Instagram, because I, like you, I think feel like I want to take the approach of like, hey, I never want to not be thought of, because I know that if I wait too long, I will be forgotten about. Like, my label will be forgotten about, or these bands will be forgotten about. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, because I'm not the one controlling your feed, like, I mean, you can unfollow me anytime you want, and that's your choice as a fan or a consumer of music or whatever. So I'm not forcing you to like my band or my label or any of the bands that are on my label. That's your decision, It's my job to push that stuff, as somebody who is running. I mean, it's a business, it's something that I care about, and it's something that I put a lot of time and heart into, but it has to somehow see a return from a business standpoint, or else I feel like I wouldn't, like, I don't know. I guess I'm like that project driven guy who just wants to see a return,
No, of course. But that's the thing too, is that like, we also have to measure like the value of a return, like, of course, like a purchase is a valuable return, but a share is also a valuable return,
Totally.
Or even a like is also a valuable return. And it's just as valuable as those people who unfriend you, because those aren't the people. Like, if they can't handle 1 post from you a day or 2 posts from you a day, then they don't care about your like brand or your label or my book or whatever enough that they're not even gonna like, you know, provide value to that, in that whether it's buying a book or, you know, the people who care about what you have to offer don't unfriend you for sharing content.
Right.
And you don't want people anyway who don't care about what you have to offer. So sure, maybe your numbers go down, but the value of your numbers goes up because you have people who actually care about what you have to offer.
Sure. Sure. No, it's,
Which I'm sure you know, but I've thrown that out there for the people listening who, you know, are, you know, can't imagine being okay with losing followers. Like, it's okay. They weren't valuable followers anyway.
yeah. I mean, I mean, not to get too far off the rails, but we live in such an interesting time. It's like, it's so funny that like 10 or 15 years ago, like, I mean, people were thinking about these kinds of things, but now we're living it, you know, like
Yeah.
every day, like even like on our personal Instagrams or something like that. I mean, it just starts to feel like weird when you're putting stuff out there and then like you're seeing certain posts getting a lot of likes and then other posts not. But that's for another conversation. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a weird experience, and we're all kind of living and breathing it right now. But
Yeah.
you mentioned meditation, and you know that's something that I discovered several years back. A good friend of mine took me to go to a guided meditation in the town that we were living in. He was a bandmate of mine, and I cannot thank him enough for this, because that night is what kind of set me in that direction. And I've been meditating daily now for a few years.
Wow.
And you know, I don't do a lot. It's like usually 10 minutes a day.
Yeah.
So it's not a lot, right? But even just that 10 minutes is incredibly valuable to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I cannot say enough positive things about what that has done for my life.
Yeah.
And I would encourage anyone listening to this to give it a try.
Yeah,
Right?
same here. I mean, and I think, you know, hearing you say that actually helps me out a little bit too, because I think well, maybe not immediately, but pretty quickly started doing like 20 minutes a day. And I think that kind of intimidates me. And so like when I do it, it doesn't intimidate me, but it intimidates me from doing it in the first place. Like there are plenty of days where I don't do it. And I think it's because I'm holding myself to 20 minutes. And I think I need to go down a little bit on like 10 minutes and try that. That might be easier for me to like do, because I do it first thing in the morning. But yeah, I mean, what's your experiences with like, what benefits did you feel from it? Or like you think, like why you talk so highly of it?
Well, the immediate benefit for me, it came pretty quickly, was just a sense of calm, you know,
Yeah.
just like this moment in time, and it doesn't last a long time. I mean, like for instance, that first night that I went, it was a 20-minute meditation, and then about a half hour of a talk, like a Dharma talk, and then another 45 minutes. So this was my first time,
Wow.
right? And I remember very vividly having that kind of brief instant moment of just like ding, like I felt really calm for like really calm
Yeah.
for the first time in a really long time. And I wanted that feeling again.
Yeah.
And so I kept going back, and like, you know, it was only once a week that we would go, but it was my friend and I, we would go once a week. And then eventually I started going and doing it more often. And then I stopped doing it for a few years, but then I've actually been using that app Headspace.
That's what I use too.
Yeah. And so I've been using that app Headspace, and I know that there's a few others out there, but I've just been dedicated to that one. And yeah, I do it at night before I go to bed. And it gives me that nice wind down from my day, and allows me to just have that calm that I crave, you know? And it's
Yeah.
almost like, I mean, I wouldn't call it like a drug, but or anything like that, but it's something that I look forward to now, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know that even just a brief moment of clearing my head, knowing that, okay, I'm just here with my body, I can feel okay.
Yeah.
And nothing's going to weigh me down. And, you know, there's times where I meditate and my head's still spinning, you know, and I
Yeah.
can't get out of it.
Totally.
But you kind of learn to grow with that and understand that that's part of the process, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was the best thing for me, which was taught and is probably taught very early in all meditation, like either teachers or apps or whatever. I'm sure it's taught very early that don't worry if you lose focus, because all you have to do is just bring it back and then come back to the breath or whatever. And that was the first benefit that was almost immediately, like immediate for me, because I do have ADD and I have a lot of trouble focusing, especially when it's something like my day job where, you know, I'm not super excited about, you know, if I'm working on something I'm excited about, I don't have as much trouble. But so being at my day job and like when I started doing meditation and I'd lose focus, I was so conscious of it. Like, hey, you just lost focus, bring it back and now focus. And so that's a very like immediate benefit that I got out of it. But I think for like, I don't want people to get overwhelmed by like all this benefit that we're talking about. If you just look at it as simply as anytime you make a decision in your life, anytime you do anything, if you stop and take a breath for 30 seconds, you're going to decide, you're going to have a clearer head when you're making your next move. That's all meditation is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're just putting everything, delaying everything for 10 minutes while you sit and take a breath and just like clear your head. That's all it is. And I mean, because I was somebody who was so intimidated by it and never did it for a long time. But when you think of it that simply, like you're just taking a minute and clearing your head. Everything else can wait. You can do it for 5 minutes. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can all understand that like if you just take a breath and clear your head, everything that happens afterwards is going to be more thought out. So
Totally.
That's meditation. Just think of it like that, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. I definitely agree that I think a lot of people are intimidated by it because they're probably very afraid that they're just not going to have the focus.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that's kind of like the irony of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, well, you don't really have to, you know?
Yeah.
You can just literally be in that moment with anything you have, you know?
Yeah.
So if your head's spinning, just be with it, you know? If your heart is racing, be with it, you know? That's part of the process. And eventually it's like touching on that whole mindfulness thing. It's like, it's less about having to have like this arrow, you know, focus on something and more about just being aware, you know, of what's going on, because we are so distracted by everything.
Yeah.
I mean, we have shit coming at us literally all day. You know, we wake up to our phones, we go to sleep to our phones, we have TV screens in front of us. I mean, I work as a computer, you know, developer, so I'm in front of my fucking screen all day.
No.
You know, I'm doing this kind of stuff. I mean, meditation, I think, is needed now more than ever, you know?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
But another thing I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I said, and for everybody, no matter what you do, we're all distracted by something. Like I'm also in front of a computer for my job. So that's easy. But even if you're not in front of a computer, like this is the only way to be mindful and like if you're not consciously like finding a way to slow down and take a breath, then you're not doing it. You're just not.
Right.
You could do it. Maybe you're doing it through yoga or something if you're trying to, but if you're not even thinking about it, then you're just going boom, 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 like one thing to the next throughout life. And you're just not thinking things out. Like just imagine how different things would be if you spent 5 minutes thinking, you know, or 5 minutes just not rushing into something, you know. Like I think that's a very cool idea.
Yeah, I think part of what the benefits from something like meditation provide is that it allows you to kind of, you know, because we're constantly filling our brains, but we're never allowing ourselves to empty it out, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's a metaphor that I try to use when I'm thinking about it is like, okay, like I've already filled up to capacity and I'm leaking out. I need to empty some space so that I can receive again and be much more attentive, you know? And I don't know, even just that 10 minutes a day, you know, makes a huge difference for me. So I would encourage anyone. And, you know, something that you briefly touched on too, and, you know, we don't have to go down too far the rabbit hole, but, you know, therapy, like I went to therapy off and on for many years too, you know, for different things that I, you know, won't go into, but I absolutely would encourage anyone who is thinking about it to give it a try, because therapy, I mean, it's a process, you know, finding the right therapist is a big part of it. I mean, that's probably one of the most significant parts of it.
It really is. Yeah.
Because a good therapist will help guide you to get to where you need to be with therapy.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to feel like right out of the gate that you have to just like spill your guts and like it's just gonna come out like a waterfall, you know?
Yeah. And if you give it that time too, when you find the right therapist, you're gonna find out things that you weren't even thinking about in the beginning. Because I've seen so many therapists just because I got out of the Army like 10 years ago, and like 11 years ago now, and that's when I was diagnosed in the Army with major depressive disorder and anxiety disorder. But for me, after a certain point, like I know kind of what like traumatic things I experienced then that really messed with me. And I know my problems, you know? So I'd go to a therapist on day one and be like, look, I just want to get fixed as fast as possible. So I'm going to be an open book with you and pour it all out. Right. But after 2 years, man, I have learned so much about myself, and I've learned new things that like he's helped me with this like fear of failure stuff and like this worry about what other people are thinking stuff. And that I wasn't acknowledging that in the beginning. In the beginning, I was just acknowledging like, hey, this shitty stuff happened in the Army and I want to like not worry about it anymore. So like it is very valuable, but I always struggle talking about this because I understand that at least a lot of that therapy might not be available to everybody.
Right.
And at least that I think that's the case. But when I've mentioned this, I've learned so many new things about like state organizations that have free therapy for people. Like on a podcast I did a couple of days ago, I listened to an episode before, and the woman who was on there was a therapist, and she was part of this organization in Maryland that has 2,000 mental health workers who donate their time to help people, to like be their therapist. It's not a hotline. It's like they will be your therapist. 2,000 of them. So like that's in Maryland. And I know that there are other states that have those kinds of organizations too. The drummer from the Wonder Years put together an organization where he has actual therapists and social workers who have offered their time for free to counsel people who have dealt with traumatic stuff from, you know, Black Lives Matter protests, or if they're dealing with any kind of trauma that they just need to talk about because of all this shit that's happening right now. There are people out there who will talk to you for free. And
totally.
Even beyond that, but this is why I say like it takes work. If you're gonna get healthier, just like any other way of getting healthier, you got to work out. It takes work, you know? And so you gotta look this stuff up. If you believe, I mean, because that's the problem is like people stop believing this. But everybody has a reason to keep living, whether or not you know it right now, because there were times I didn't know it, and then I got to do cool shit that like child me and teenage me dreamed of doing. There's a reason to keep going. And I mean, I've already had people tell me that this book has had the same effect on them. Basically, by what they've said, I could tell this book has had the same effect on them that a Bayside album had on me 15 years ago, or a Dangerous Summer album had on me 15 years ago. And so like but like you said, that may not be your thing. You don't have to write an album. You don't have to write a book. You don't have to make a TV show. Maybe you just that. Maybe you're a Bayside album to one other friend by just talking to them. You know, so like there are so many Facebook groups out there where people are. I mean, that last podcast I did was for this group called the I Care Movement, which has this Facebook group. It's all about people just getting on there and talking about their mental health issues and people responding and helping out. I've seen people like ready to commit suicide on there, and people just come to them and just talk to them. Like it's out there. Like if you can't afford therapy or think you can't find therapy because you don't have medical insurance, and if you're not going to look for it, because you probably can, because there's a ton of organizations out there that do it for free. But get on Facebook, man. Get on a Facebook group. Talk to a friend. Like, talk to anybody. Like, that's it. It makes you feel so much better just to talk about it, because then you're going to find out that you're not the only one who feels like this.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like, to use another metaphor, like I think that's like a muscle that you have to just learn how to flex. You know?
Yeah.
And it's not easy,
No.
you know, because it is an exercise in like courage and trust. And, you know, trust is a big one, you know, like a lot of people are afraid to trust and afraid to be vulnerable. And, you know, sometimes like, I mean, I've certainly had my own experiences with this where I've had to, you know, reach out to people, and, you know, I can honestly say that like, I can't remember or think of a time that I've ever had like suicidal ideation or anything like that, but I know plenty of people that have.
Yeah.
You know? And just hearing about it from their experiences, and like even like reflecting upon like your book and like what you were experiencing over the course of like those 4 days in like that hotel, it's like, you know, it's heavy stuff, and it's real, and it's not uncommon. Like that's the truth of it, is that this is happening all the time. And, you know, we all can be doing more to support each other, and we should. And I think that most people do. I think that most people do. But I mean, I'd be hard pressed to think of anyone that I know of that would just say, no, I'm not available. Sorry. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Cause I would like to think that anyone who is like that would not be a person that I would want to know, be my friend or anything like that. But yeah, it's easier said than done, but I hope that people who are listening to this and, you know, maybe are considering, you know, either reaching out for therapy or considering meditation, or just thinking that they might need somebody to talk to and like work through some stuff, I would encourage you to do so. I'm sure Mike does too.
Yeah, for sure. Totally. And you know what, like, I think a big problem that some people face, I'm like trying to cover all the bases here, but, because this is something for me too. Like, I never talked to my parents about this stuff, you know? And I think that's something people face, is that they feel like they can't talk to their parents. And if you can't talk to your parents, who can you talk to? Mm-hmm. Honestly, anybody else. Like, I did not have parents that I could talk to about this stuff. And I love so many of my friends more than my family and more than my parents. Like, don't think because like your brother or your parents, maybe you've put this thought into your head that like, oh, well, they don't love me enough to give a shit. Why would somebody who's not related to me? Because that's another thing that I got out of like the punk scene. And I know it doesn't only exist in there, but it's like, we like look out for each other, you know?
Right.
And man, I am so much tighter with my friends than my family, period. There are plenty of good people in my family that I love and love me back. But my friends that are still in my life have been there for me through everything, you know? And so like, don't assume just because like a family member doesn't provide that for you or make you feel like you're loved or cared for, that nobody can. Like, man, friends are the best thing ever. Like,
yeah.
And they're there for you, and maybe they don't know you're going through this. So yeah, man, I have such great friends that, you know, are just always there for me, and I'm there for them. And that's, you know, that's out there too.
Yeah. I oftentimes think about like that whole adage where it's like, you have your family and then you have your chosen family, right?
Yeah, like you
And,
pick your friends, but you can't pick your family.
right.
But yeah, but I like see my friends as my family more than some family members.
Yeah. And like, that's pretty common. I mean,
Yeah,
like I consider myself to be pretty close with my family. I mean, we're not like the tightest Leave It to Beaver family. Like, I mean, we
yeah,
never really were, but thankfully I can reach out to them. And if I've ever had any issues, to bring
yeah,
up, like they're usually very receptive. So I'm very grateful for that, but not everyone has that, So I don't know.
yeah.
I think that's a good point to kind of like turn this over to our last couple of questions,
Oh
if
yeah,
you don't mind.
no,
I mean, really appreciate the thoughtful, conversation, man. This
yeah,
is all
man.
like really good stuff. And I certainly appreciate and, think that everything that you've said is really great and really
I hope I
positive.
got I hope I got rid of all the excuses somebody could make about trying to get more mentally healthy.
Right. Well, yeah. So a couple of the things that I like to ask every guest on the podcast, first of which, being somebody who's been kind of involved in and surrounded yourself with the music scene, are there any artists, either newer or older, that people may not be aware of that you think people should look up? Can you name a
Okay,
few for me?
um, so one of my favorite bands over the last couple of years has been a band called Have Mercy. They were on Hopeless Records for a few records, so they're not exactly unknown, but they broke up last year, and the singer Brian Swindle is releasing new music very soon. So people should definitely look up Brian Swindle, because he was the singer and songwriter for Have Mercy. He's writes some beautiful songs. He's got an amazing voice, and he's just a great songwriter all around. So that's going to be great. Let me think. Other bands, period, that I think people are overlooking. Um, it's hard for me because I am not so. I mean, I haven't been to a show since March, and like that's how I discover bands that are unheard of.
Right.
Um, I mean, there's a band called Hot Mulligan, which also aren't unheard of, but for people like me, 38 years old, who don't really pay close attention to newer music, they're a newer band, and last couple of years, and they're a pop punk band, but they're so like they stand out so much right now. So I'd tell people to go listen to them, because, like I said, it's very hard for me to get into new music. And those guys just like were so easy for me to like immediately put into my rotation. Um, Go listen to the Juliana Theory if you haven't. If you're a youngin who hasn't heard of the Juliana Theory, their first two records are so huge for me. Emotion is Dead and Understand This Is a Dream. Yeah, I think that's the best I can do right now for that.
That's totally fine, man. I mean, it's, under the circumstances, I mean, having just spit this question out to you,
Wait, let me throw one more in there.
sure.
There's a band out of Virginia, like the DC, Virginia area, called Sub Radio. They are very like they're like a pop dancey band, but kind of still like in the realm of like Walk the Moon. And when I met them, like I could see them like becoming like a Panic at the Disco.
Mm.
I made some music videos for them a couple years ago, but they're so good, so talented. Every new thing they put out, it just blows me away, and I constantly repost it and say like they're the most talented people I know. So yeah, Sub Radio, check those guys out if you can stand dancey pop music, which like I love it when it's good, and these guys are the best. So check them out.
Sweet. And yeah, thanks for that. And the last question that I like to throw out to people is, give me your top 5 albums, like desert album, desert island albums.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the one that I'm like sure of is Rancid and Out Come the Wolves. I love that record so much. It's one of the first CDs my brother and I ever bought. That's one. And I say that one as my first one because all the other ones I think of are pretty like sad and emo. And then I came to realize that like I can't be stuck on an island with only sad music.
Sure.
And then immediately Out Come the Wolves and Out Come the Wolves hit me is like such a great record. It's so
It
good.
is.
Um, and I'm gonna put Juliana Theory's "Emotion Is Dead" on there. I still listen to that all the time. It holds up. Like it is not dated as far as I can remember. Like I was just listening to it a couple days ago. It's so good. That's definitely on there. Um, let me see. I think Jimmy Eat World Futures is one of my favorite records of all time. There's three songs off that I think are in my book, or maybe
Yeah,
two.
you definitely referenced that album several
Yeah.
times in the book. So
So yeah, that's three. This one is like the first album that pops into my head, but it's because it's so like emo that I hold back on it. Bright Eyes, I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning.
okay.
That's probably like one of the first records I saw as a record I could listen to from beginning to end without skipping a song. There's such great songs on there. And in fact, one of those songs is in my book as well. So that's one. So that's four.
Yep.
And then number five, I'm going to have to go with Taylor Swift's Red.
Okay.
That is my favorite Taylor Swift record. It's just a damn good record, period. It's got some highs. It's got some ups and downs. So it's not too sad. It got some pick-me-up music in there. So yeah, Taylor Swift's Red, number five.
Nice. Have you heard her new one?
I have. I did not. So I liked Lover when it came out because it was close to Red. But then when this new one came out, Folklore, I liked it, but I didn't love it. Like it wasn't. I felt like it was kind of background music. It's very like, kind of has like one tone across the whole thing.
I can hear that. Yeah.
And so like, I don't know if you're gonna judge me on this, but I am not a huge National fan. Do you like the National?
I think the National are fine. I've seen them in concert. Like they're good. You know.
I think that's the problem. Is like my introduction to the National was like a daytime set at Lollapalooza.
Yeah, and that's not like
Probably not the
ideal for
best
them.
way to watch the National. But so many people whose tastes I respect love the National, and I guess there's like one or two guys from the National who worked on the new Taylor Swift record.
From what I understand, it's like guys from the National and Bon Iver, I think.
Bon Iver, yeah. And like I liked Bon Iver. I like Bon Iver. But it's definitely for a mood, you know.
Sure.
I
mean, it's a sad album.
Yeah.
That Taylor Swift album is it's sad. Like it, my wife's gonna kill me, but we were listening to it the other day, and it got her. Like
yeah,
like this one song hit, and she's like, nope. She started like crying.
Oh no! You know what? I really need to give it another chance because like I appreciated it for what it was,
right,
but it just wasn't like what I wanted from Taylor Swift. Like
sure.
I just want Red over and over from Taylor Swift. That's it. And Lover was close enough that I could accept that, but everything in between I just didn't care for.
Yeah.
And so like I need to give it more of a chance.
Yeah.
The problem is that the Dixie Chicks also put out a new record the week before, and that one's really good. That is what I wanted from a new Dixie Chicks record, whereas the new Taylor Swift record was not what I wanted from a new Taylor Swift record, you know? So I just need to give it more of a chance. I know I didn't give it enough.
Yeah. I still have to listen to that new, I think they're called just the Chicks now, right?
Chicks, yeah. But like Jack Antonoff produced it, and so like it's got the feel of an old of Taylor Swift record, you know, of what you want from a Taylor Swift record.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's a really good record.
Cool. Well, hey, Mike, it's been such a pleasure talking to you with you, man. And like, you know, I really enjoyed the book. I think anyone who's interested in reading like a good book memoir that ties in, you know, some music from this era, as well as, you know, maybe touches on, battling with mental illness and addiction, anything like that. I mean, it's a really good story, you know, and it's true, you know.
Yeah.
So I would encourage anyone to pick it up. But yeah, man, great book. Nice to have you on here.
Yeah. And yeah, anybody can find me online at A Burger Joint. on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's ABERGERJOINT. So yeah, if you want info on the book or any videos that I'm doing, just check out A Burger Joint. There's also a podcast, A Burger Joint podcast, where I like put audiobook chapters on, and I interview bands all the time for different things. And so I'll throw my band interviews on there too. So yeah, if you're interested in anything I'm doing, just look for A Burger Joint.
Sounds great.
Cool.
Talk to you soon, Mike. Take care.
All right. Thank you. Bye.